Welcome to the Seizure Turnaround, where we explore the topic of functional seizures through conversations with people who provide an unfiltered record of their experience. Today we're joined by Janis Shoesmith, a former pediatric nurse diagnosed with functional seizures following a physical assault at work. The inspirational story of her recovery is one of self-empowerment and tenacity, demonstrating how inner strength and determination can overcome the obstacles that a diagnosis of functional seizure brings. Welcome to the podcast, Janis.
Thank you for inviting me, Lana.
Well, before we learn more about your recovery journey, can you share with us what life was like for you before the onset of functional seizures?
So before the seizures and before the assault 13 years ago, I was a confident nurse, been in pediatric nursing for 30 years and was doing very well with my career. I was outgoing, life and soul of the party, first up to dance, last to sit down, and just very involved in things like within the community, loved my gardening, never had any problems doing anything, and just generally loved life with my husband and 2 children.
Do you remember the first seizure you had? Were you working as a nurse at that time?
No, I had already, unfortunately, had to leave work. I was diagnosed with PTSD before the functional seizures. So the PTSD had got a good grip on me and I'd already been in and out of hospital. And then one evening at home, I developed these seizures and very sudden in bed, didn't know what was going on. And then obviously like Keith called the ambulance, my husband, and they came and I still had more. And went into hospital, didn't know really what was happening. Pseudo was mentioned, but obviously come in, have an admission, and we'll see what we can do. Left there with no answers that day. And it took me a long while of having quite a few seizures and of actually going back in and out of emergency department. Before one day being in another hospital, local public hospital, and neurologist was coming to do his ward rounds and he said, Janis, I've got a diagnosis for you. I know what you've got. You've got PNES, psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, which is what it was when I was initially diagnosed. That was the name before it changed to functional seizures. And he said, you need to see either one of these 2 psychologists. They know their stuff, they know what they're talking about, and they're going to help you. Great. I had to wait 5 months to get in to see one of these lovely ladies, which was 5 months of having more seizures on a daily basis and feeling exhausted and just, yeah.
So that must have been very difficult getting the diagnosis, but then having to wait such a long time to receive any sort of help. What was going through your mind at that stage?
It's great that I've been given a diagnosis, but having such a long wait, it was, how are we going to manage this at home? You know, what about going out? Because I'd had some in public, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners will understand as well, which having them in public is even more emotional and it can be embarrassing. Yeah. It was really tough because you just didn't know quite how to manage it. And I could not see any light at the end of the tunnel. I couldn't see them stopping. And I think that it was just a really tough time for us as a family as well.
Mm. And at that stage, apart from your family, was there any sort of support that you had?
I had some support in terms of like another psychologist, but she was very open with the fact that she really couldn't help me with them because she didn't really know much about them. It wasn't her expertise, which was really tough. So there wasn't any other support. There was no support from the hospital. They gave me the diagnosis and sent me home and told me to contact this one person. And it was just, you had nothing. you get sent home from hospital with nothing. My husband was just saying to them, well, how am I supposed to manage Janis and her seizures? I'm going out to work. I'm leaving her at home. What happens? She's having seizures at home. And I think that that was really hard for him as well, because he still had to work.
Mm. And I'm curious to know, Janis, how long after the assault did seizures occur?
In all honesty, Lana, I really can't remember. I think that because of all the trauma, my brain just does not want to remember. I was in and out of hospital so much because of the PTSD, and everybody was quite focused on trying to get me through the PTSD, that the seizures took a bit of a backseat. Yeah, it would have been possibly even a year or more.
Okay.
So,
yeah. And so you had that 5 months of just waiting to see somebody who could help you. And then talk us through what happened when you did finally engage with someone who could help you.
Yeah, it was lovely to meet this lovely lady. And she said, tell me all about the seizures for you, because different people may present differently. So it was just a case of tell me about them, what is it for you? What happens? And yeah, for me, I would often get a feeling of being extraordinarily hot, wanting to rip my clothes off. Then my right side starts twitching, and then everything else just joins in. And because you can hear the voices around you, it's actually quite disturbing in a way, because there's people talking about you and you can't respond to what they're saying. And I think that that was quite a big thing for me that I had to talk about, because I had no control over that.
Mm.
And knowing that not everybody, even paramedics that came to my aid when I was out, there was one in particular, one young lady that was just very, it was almost like I was taking up too much of their time, that I was putting all of this on, that I shouldn't do this. And that's just the feeling that I got. And to know that people are making you feel like that for something that you cannot control and you don't like.
So it sounds like there was all of the trauma from the assault that you sustained and then the seizures themselves. But then on top of that, there's the additional medical trauma, if we can call it that, and the way that you were treated as well. Yeah. So just so much to deal with.
I think that one of the hardest things is speaking up for yourself and sticking up for yourself.
Did your 30-year career in nursing help you in any way? Do you think that was an advantage or a disadvantage?
Bit of both, because I hadn't heard of these types of seizures either. So that was really hard. And I think one of the hardest things as well was me being a patient. I'd always been the carer. And suddenly I had to accept care from others, and it was me that really needed the help.
What was that like, Janis? What was the most difficult about that?
Handing power over to other people. Suddenly, I was the one that everybody was talking about on the ward rounds, it was just really hard. Having to accept all the help from the nurses. I wanted to do everything. I always wanted to make my bed even, So, yeah, just handing over that power to somebody else and being vulnerable, allowing other people to care for me when I really needed it most.
So, Janis, was there a specific moment that led you onto your recovery path?
No, it was very, very gradual. From 4 or 5 seizures a day, they started reducing. Still carried on seeing my psychologist, kept going and doing all of this work. And sometimes I'd be given homework And that was really hard sometimes to do, because every hour that I would spend with my psychologist then would make me very, very tired.
Mm.
And all I really wanted to do was go home and have a sleep. But then gradually you have less seizures. And then one day I'm just like, oh, I haven't had any. I've gone to bed and I've had none today. And I can't pinpoint when that was. And then you'd gradually have more and more time where you didn't have a seizure, to the point of I went a whole year without having a seizure.
Mm. So you went into remission, which must have been incredibly encouraging. Was there anything in particular, any encounters that you remember that were particularly valuable, or anything that anyone said to you that sticks in your mind?
I think that just the kindness of the psychologists was huge. They made me feel that I was worth their time and effort, that they wanted to see me well just as much as my family did and I did. They were the ones that really got me through the hard times. And, I used to go weekly, and, then as the seizures got less, I could go every fortnight. But when the seizures were really rampant, like, I'd go once a week. But if I had choice, I'd be seeing somebody like more than once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, because it's so horrible to experience it and you just want to get well. And nobody wants to have them.
No.
And I think that this is something that I would like the broader medical people to understand, like the nurses, the doctors, the consultants, anybody that comes into contact with people that do have them. I just want to see kindness, understanding, and not to make us feel even worse than we do already.
And Janis, for people who may never have been to a psychologist or received any sort of treatment for their functional seizures, you were saying that sometimes there were things you had to do for yourself, for homework, things you had to work through. Could you share with our listeners what sort of things they were?
She'd give me tasks, writing all the positives against all the negatives. And gradually you would see over time your list of what was great in your life was getting longer, and the list of what you didn't like was getting shorter. And then also part of my homework was about going out and about with my friends or my family. And that gradual exposure of being out, and, how long can you stay? You just, initially it was go have coffee. Maybe you're staying half an hour for a chat in a cafe with somebody. And then, it was, well, try and go out for lunch and, go somewhere that's pretty quiet, that, that's very familiar. And then, you gradually ask to go out for longer periods of time, different times of the day, evening, things like that. And I think that kind of just, it made me feel very nervous. But it was also quite fun in a way, because like you had to come up with different things to do. And yeah, there was a lot of CBT work.
And for listeners who may never have heard of CBT, can you?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
That's right.
Yes. So yeah, challenging our thoughts and our feelings, and yes. And challenging our thoughts and our feelings is not easy.
Yes, I can see you smiling there. So that may be something that took a little bit of practice.
Yes. And even today, I'm still not one that can do that very easily. It's one of the challenges I had, was actually to write the good and write about my thoughts and share them. And yeah, I can actually remember seeing a psychologist. I can remember her saying one day, congratulations, you've actually just told me all your story today about your assault. And I hadn't realized up until that point, I'd been seeing her for a few months before I'd really become vulnerable again and would actually tell her everything about the assault. So, and I think that this is one of the hardest things. You need to find a psychologist that does understand functional seizures. You need to find a psychologist that you gel with.
Hmm. And a lot of people find it very difficult to think about the things that might be triggering their seizures, and they actually spend a lot of time trying to work that out. Have you got any advice?
I would say don't spend too much time and energy on trying to figure everything out. You will figure it out in time. The most important thing is to go and get help and talk about what has happened for you. That's why I think it's really important to try and do some research on the psychologists that you are going to see so that you know what their interests are. You know a bit about them before you go. And yeah, and unfortunately, there's not that many people out there that know about these seizures.
Yeah, and especially when you had yours such a long time ago. So, Janis, you were well and then seizure free. You went back to work.
Yes, I did. I did go back to work, not as a nurse, but I do work and I work in an office and I do have a decent job now. It's not the same, but at least I have got back into the workforce. And getting back into the workforce gives you a bit of a boost. It makes you feel wanted and useful again. Because when I was having the seizures, you're worthless, you're useless, all of the names that you can think that are negative is how I used to describe myself. No self-confidence. Found life really, really hard to get through on a daily basis. But now things are so much better now.
And so, Janis, tell us about the time when you were working full time back at work. Everything was great, but then you had an episode at work.
Yes, that was very strange. I'd got a phone call while I was at work, guy saying he was from my bank. And it all turned out that I suddenly realized I was being scammed. And then I started having a seizure. And before I knew where I was on the floor.
And your work colleagues didn't know that you actually used to have seizures.
No.
You'd never told them because you hadn't had them
Never.
for years. So there was no
point.
point.
No. Yeah, that was very embarrassing because I could hear them talking. I could hear them on the phone to the ambulance. Yeah, then of course, I had to come clean at work.
So you eventually told them you.
Yeah, I did. And my manager was really nice about it. And he was just like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm so sorry that that's happened to you. But if it does happen again, Janis, what would you like us to do? Which was really nice. So we came up with a little plan of what to do should it happen again. Luckily, it never did.
We haven't talked about the assault, but that's an incredible story in itself. What was the darkest moment or the sort of the lowest point that you really felt throughout? Was there ever a time where you just thought, look, I'll never get rid of these?
Absolutely. I just thought that they're with me and how am I ever going to move on from these? How am I going to travel? I have lots of family in the UK. And I can actually remember one year, Keith and I got on the plane and before it even took off, I'd had a seizure on the plane, which was just awful. Still went to England, still got there. But yeah, it's been such a long, long journey from the assault 13 years ago. And as you know, Lana, it's actually 13 years to the day today of the assault, which, yeah, it's just one of those things that led me on a journey from there on in that I never, ever thought would happen to me because these things happen to other people. They don't happen to me. It's really hard to come to grips with when I look at all of my diagnoses when they're all written down: PTSD, PNES, complex regional pain syndrome, neuropathic pain, plus the depression and the anxiety that go along with PTSD. So you've got to get to the root of the problem to be able to treat them. And I think that is what happened for me. We got really down to minute detail that we were talking about of the assault. And whilst I'd be crying my eyes out talking about things, once I started to express everything, get it all out and be able to talk about it, and like one of my psychologists said, well, why do you think it's your fault? Why? You tell me why you think it's your fault. And then we're going to explore that. It wasn't my fault, not at all, but it's just how you initially think, what if I did, if only I hadn't done, and you go down a rabbit warren. And once you start going down that way, you can't get back. So my psychologist would always pull me back from there. And I think that you're going to have a lot of people out there that are listening to the podcast that do have these seizures that, maybe they've been told that they're pseudo seizures, that, they've been told to snap out of it, don't put them on, stop doing it. Well, yes, if we could, we would, but we can't. And I think that what your listeners have to do is actually find somebody to treat the root cause, because you treat the root cause and you treat the seizures.
And if you had your chance over, Janis, would you do anything differently?
I think that maybe I would have tried harder to get help. It took me a long while to actually decide to go and see somebody. And I think the reason I didn't get help was, as I said before, I am a nurse and I should be able to cope. I take care of people. People don't take care of me.
So, Janis, if you could have a conversation with your newly diagnosed self, what would you say to her?
Get help as soon as you can. Acknowledge that you need help. Needing help for your mental health is nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing that is your fault. And if you had a broken arm, you would go and get help immediately. So why not go and get help for this immediately? Yeah, I would have been telling myself to get help a lot quicker.
That's excellent advice. And Janis, throughout this seizure recovery journey, lots of people find it really difficult while they're recovering to focus on themselves and keep themselves well. What advice would you give to people struggling with that?
I am very blessed that I have probably the best husband in the world, but he has been an amazing support, and he has really helped me, come on, get dressed, we'll go out and get a coffee, or, always asking me, what are your plans for today? Or what are your plans for tomorrow? And I think because he was always asking me, coming from a very good place, that it made me think, yes, what can I do? And some days we can't do anything. We're just too tired. If you're having 5-6 seizures a day, you are too tired to do anything, but probably get up out the bed and go to the bathroom and maybe have something to eat, and remember to drink as well. And do you know what? If you don't feel like having a shower, well, just say to yourself, today, I am going to have a be kind to myself day. I will do things tomorrow, but for today, I'm going to rest because I am exhausted. And there is nothing wrong with taking a day to rest when you are exhausted because you've had so many seizures.
And you certainly don't rest too much, though. I hear that you're very active.
Yes.
What do you actually do?
So I organise placements for students doing health courses. And in my spare time, I love personal training. I like taking my dog out for walks and but pottering around in the garden. I have my therapy, and I think that that's important that you do look after yourself like that as well. And I think that having somebody in your corner, if it's not your partner, do you have a best friend, or, can you enlist your mum or your dad or a brother or a sister to be your champion? And when you are feeling down, know that you can pick the phone up to them or say to them, please, can you come round and can we just sit and have a coffee together at home? I just need somebody just for today.
Mm. And Janis, what would you say to people that say functional seizures are permanent, or that you can never recover from them, or that things will get worse once you have a diagnosis of functional seizures?
I think they're wrong. I think that once you have a diagnosis of functional seizures, that's when you start to get better, not worse. The seizures will continue whilst you are seeking treatment and getting better. But at the end of the day, whether it be a year, 2, 3 years down the line, whatever it might be, 4 years, 5 years, you can recover from this. You can go back and lead an active life. You can get back to work. You can get out and do things in the community that brings you joy. And I think that whilst you are at home recovering and resting, maybe write yourself a little list of, what you would like to achieve when you are well, knowing that you can get well. What is it that you would like to do? One of the things that I wanted to do, which I did a couple of years ago, was actually climb all the steps down in the Dandenong Ranges.
Wow.
Yes.
And is there a personal goal now that you're working on?
Getting some fitness back. I'm looking forward to going back to the UK next August to see my family, getting my hugs from my granddaughter.
That's lovely. It sounds like life's pretty good for you right now.
Most of the time it is. I have my bad days still, and I allow myself to have those bad days. And then I reset, I get up and I start back again in the morning. And that's one of the things that I have learned over the years, is that one bad day doesn't mean that you're going to keep having bad days. Unfortunately, the anniversary of my assault came round last October, and for some reason last year I actually crumbled days before and days afterwards, and that's when I started really going downhill again with my mental health. And I think that that's possibly why I've had another couple. And I think that for me, the things that trigger it all and trigger my stress and the memories is because of my chronic pain. So I unfortunately have a daily reminder of the assault. So I've found somebody again that does understand trauma and functional seizures, and it's working really well. So, I haven't had one again for a few months again now. So, and it wasn't vicious like it used to be.
Well, Janis, overall, it strikes me that you've made an amazing recovery.
Thank you. Look, I've had some amazing people looking after me, and I do think that I'm very, very blessed with having amazingly good friends and family. I don't think I could have done this journey had I not had them in my corner.
Janis, is there anything that you haven't told us today that you think would be really helpful for other people who may be newly diagnosed or struggling with functional seizures?
There is help out there. Seek it out. Get the help that you deserve. And just remember, you can recover. There is light at the end of the tunnel. But unfortunately, the tunnel will have some twists and turns. It will go up and down a hill, and it will do things that you don't expect it to do, but you will get there. And if I can get better anybody can get better. Don't let anybody put you down. These seizures are real. They are debilitating to start with when you're having a lot a day, but you deserve the best of care. And you deserve to get better. You deserve the right treatment. You deserve kindness along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Janis, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us on the pod today. Your wisdom and insights, I think, will be very beneficial. It will really help a lot of people going through the same thing. It's just so encouraging for people to hear somebody else who's already been through this. So we really, really appreciate your time today, especially today of all days, being 13 years to the day since that assault that kicked it all off for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Seizure Turnaround. We were joined by former pediatric nurse Janis Shoesmith. Next time on the Seizure Turnaround, we'll be exploring what it's like to parent a teenager with functional seizures. Until then, stay well.